Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY. Products are really interesting, and the design of those products and how they make our lives better or more challenging, hopefully to take away some of the challenge of life. But who are the minds behind those designs? We take a look at that today with one person in particular, and we are joined by Damian Farrell from Damian Farrell Design Group and Damian on Design.
Good morning. Good morning.
At 1290 WLBY. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, my favorite topic, right? Design thinkers.
And we have one, Alan Samuels, and you know Alan very well.
I know Alan pretty well. We've worked together years ago on Art Train in kind of imagining how mobile trucks could become art galleries. And before even my time on Art Train, you worked with Deb Pollock on Art Train on some of the earlier stuff. So yeah. Alan's association with one of my favorite organizations goes back, I think, about 20-some years now, Alan?
It's hard to remember.
How did you become an industrial designer? And you had worked at the University of Michigan for many years,
right?
Until your retirement.
Yes. Well, I earned a degree in industrial design in 1966.
But what led you to that?
Did they have degrees back then?
Well, barely.
Sorry, Alan.
On the covered wagon going west. It's interesting. Well, it's interesting to me. I'm not sure it's interesting to anybody else. I didn't know about industrial design. Most people don't. My parents still didn't or don't understand what it's about. Most people. My wife. Anyway, it's
who's a wonderful woman who had worked with Alzheimer's for years, I remember.
She is. But still there's the question about what do you do and how do you do it and so on in our family. Mm-hmm. So I don't fight that battle anymore. But I took tests like most kids did at college, trying to figure out how to spend your life. And I remember a counselor said you should work with dead people. What do you call those people who?
Cadavers?
No, not cadavers. That'd be even better. That's science.
You could manipulate them?
A funeral parlor director.
Oh, yes.
Or I don't know where he came up with that from the test.
A mortician.
A mortician, that's the word I was looking for. And I was so taken by that and shocked by it and disillusioned by it, I almost kind of just walked out.
Are you kidding me?
No, that's what it came out from the tests, and I never quite figured that out even to this day. But anyway, I kept moving on as a result of that. So he motivated me not to be a mortician. And I somehow found product design, and I just thought it was the perfect combination of invention and making things, fabricating, working with tools. It's everything I loved as a kid.
So you got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Industrial Design from the
Right.
University of Illinois?
Yes.
And then you went on to work as an industrial designer and professor of art and design at the university.
Well, not quite. I had 10 years of experience with corporations. And then I joined the university in 1975.
Okay.
And I opened an office concurrently here in Ann Arbor. And so if I wasn't in class, I was in my office working. And if I wasn't in my office working, I was in class.
What kinds of things were you thinking of? Give us some examples of the kinds of things you designed.
Well, I spent 10 years working with 3M developing devices for open heart surgery. And the interesting thing there is that I was the only one who wasn't a physician, a physicist, a surgeon. And that was precisely why I was on the team, because I didn't know anything about open heart surgery. And so when we took on a project, and it was one a week for 10 years, literally. Some of the best work I've ever done. I would say modestly. I should say the most interesting work I've ever done. And we would say things like, let's design an artificial lung, and we'll see each other in a week. Okay. And that's what we did. We all went off our separate ways. So I came back with things that I didn't have a clue could work or should work, and I really didn't care. What I was trying to do is make a lung the way I thought, and without knowing the physiology, or being ignorant, I guess is one way of putting it. It opened all kinds of doors. So I proposed a lung that was modular, like beads that I remember from the 60s when women wore plastic pop beads.
Yes.
And I cannot, again, it's like the mortician thing. I can't explain how one thing led to the other.
Yeah.
But I remember just thinking pop beads, modular, snap together. And so I proposed a lung that was modular. You could snap it together, make it bigger, smaller, denser, less dense, whatever you wished based on the patient's needs. And so you had a kit of parts that would make a lung. And that's what I proposed. And we actually tried it, and it didn't work. I mean, it was just too hard to do. And I wouldn't say we killed a lot of sheep, but close.
So if you were going to run a marathon, you could sort of pop an extra module in for the day?
No, you couldn't just open your chest and pop one in. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. Don't get him started on it.
A plug-in you could put on your arm, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's better than opening your chest while you're running. But that's the kind of thing that I've been doing all my career.
Did that design of yours, though, get them thinking in a different direction?
Well, that's the whole point. Yeah. That the cleverness of 3M at that time was to put people together who ordinarily shouldn't be together. And then you get open ideas and suggestions and
That's how
things
design
that...
thinking works, in my mind.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's not how you don't get experts who know how to do everything,
Yeah.
because they're experts.
Yeah.
The problem is you get people who are naive and willing to be foolish, I guess, not foolish in a stupid sense, but let's say courageous enough to say, how about pop beads?
Yeah.
And no one laughs because the team understood.
Mhm.
And that's how that happens. That's how the best product development
On
happens.
your website, I'm looking at some of the industrial design items you came up with during your practice.
Yeah.
Black & Decker, these are sketch models, handheld air tools.
Right. What are those?
Yeah.
In every factory, there's an assembly line, short story, and so people are putting the things together with screwdrivers and screws. And so these tools hang in the sky, and you bring them down, and you put a screw in place, screw in place, screw in place, all day long. It's tedious, nasty work. And so I was trying to make it a little more interesting for the workers. And so instead of having devices that would catch in their rings, and they wouldn't fit their hands, and I just had a device that when you pulled it down, it automatically, by virtue of pulling it down, ran the screw. I just thought it made it a lot simpler.
So you don't have to use a
There's
trigger
no trigger, no mechanism exactly,
you
just
start
the
to-
action of pulling it and engaging the screw made it go. I just thought
start
that's the
to alleviate
simplest.
soft tissue stuff.
Yeah, well,
strain
it
on
made it
joints.
a lot simpler,
Yeah.
a lot easier, it was all driven
Yeah.
by air.
Yeah.
Black & Decker wasn't one of my happiest experiences. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Why?
Because when I was there, they had no women and they had no minorities.
Mm.
And I wouldn't say they were boasting about it, but that's the way it was in Maryland at that time. And I came from companies where it was just the opposite, where they were really trying to bring
Get the
people
diversity, yeah.
together, not just, particular kinds of people.
Mhm.
I just felt just the antithesis of invention was to keep people out, especially, it's just obvious now, it's almost painful to say, but women and African Americans, they just, I found it a real problem, and I couldn't stay, I left. I left after 6 months. And the attitude, that attitude and that bigotry, I found was permeated in the way they did product development too. It was very limited.
And see, when you have that bias,
Yeah.
the innovation stops.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
Because
actually,
it
culture
distracts,
stops.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Life
Yeah.
stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember, and I don't know if you want to go into this, but one of the people there who gave me one of my first assignments was to design a line of products, tools for women. And when I listened to what they thought women were and what women would like, literally pink tools, I said to myself, this is the wrong place. This is just dumb.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't stay. And they didn't want me. It was a bad fit.
What about drinkware for Libby Glass, including glass stacking mugs?
You're good. These.
I can't imagine how that works.
Well,
You have to see them.
You have to see them, yeah. The idea was, frankly, they were glasses, not mugs. There were stacking mugs as well, but glasses were my favorite. And I designed for them or worked with them for 10 years. It's one of those long relationships that I looked for. And so every week, again, like at 3M, or we just would design new things every week. Many of them were made and the others weren't. But anyway, the glasses were about children whose grip, they couldn't hold on to a little glass because it was wet and slippery and their hands were little. And on the other side, you have elderly people with arthritis and other pain-related problems in their hands couldn't hold a glass. So I designed a glass that had a bulge in the middle that enabled them to stack one into the other, number one. And secondly, that bulge is what you gripped.
Mhm.
And so then it made it easier for kids and
Who
elderly people.
thinks of these
Yeah.
ideas?
You know,
My
I-
mind doesn't think like
But
this.
that's the idea. Design is about, I'm not looking to do what's already been done. What's the point?
Right.
Doing
So the
solve
point
new-
is to find the voids, the opportunities.
Wow.
And
I spent time in Alan's studio with him, and it's so invigorating to me. And the two of the things that he's working on are really, I find fascinating. One of them is your work about aging and the physiology of aging, what it does, but also challenging some of the things. Take, for instance, all right, we know you can have a porta potty, right, if you're in a hospital or if you're aging, right? But Alan said, well, we should take that even further, because there's a certain loss of dignity of porta potty or bedpan, those kinds of things. And if you can, why can't a toilet be brought to you in a structure that also has a wash basin in it? Why can't if you're limited in your mobility, why can't you have access to the same thing right next to your bed that the rest of us have in a bathroom?
So how do you do that?
I just kind of backed into it, so to speak, no pun intended. I said that if I can't get the patient or a person to the bathroom, and once they get to the bathroom, they couldn't use it anyway because you can't get a caregiver to safely put someone on a toilet because there's no leverage, and then you have two patients because people fall. So I said, all right, I'll bring the bathroom to the patient. So I wanted a cart that you could roll right up to the bed, and it has a toilet that flushes 23 times. It has a freshwater basin, as was pointed out, and a hamper. So you can once you transfer someone from their bed onto this cart, you can change their clothes because often they're soiled. Let's just say it out loud. People have soiled themselves. It's humiliating. It's embarrassing. It's unhealthy. So you can take their clothes off, put it in the hamper. The hamper comes out and goes to the washing machine later. In the meantime, you could do with the water, you could give a sponge bath while they're using the toilet or after. So everything's done in place is the point. You can get clean, do the bathroom things, change your clothes, and then be transferred back into bed.
Is this on the marketplace now?
No, we came very close.
Why isn't it?
Well,
there's a whole story.
There's a whole story in itself. Yeah, the short answer is I couldn't find a company that wanted to make it. I dealt with Thedford here in Ann Arbor, an excellent company, and we came this close to doing it, but for business reasons and the complexity of Medicare and so on, they just said it wasn't a good business decision for them at that time.
It wouldn't make money.
Well, I think it would have had they wanted to go through. They had other priorities. I can't speak for them except to say they had other priorities, and they made their decisions. So we came close. But then I couldn't find other companies even willing to talk about it.
What other kinds of aging items have you thought of that would help these people?
Well, if you think about aging, which regretfully is something we will all do, and it won't be happy, because you lose mobility, you lose your depth of field visually, you lose your dexterity, your strength. I mean, it's not a happy thing. And so you just try to deal with it. And so I just look at all those categories of what you can't do easily anymore as opportunities. So if, for example, if you're in the bathtub and you've soiled yourself, again, not to linger on this, but people often do at that age when you have incontinence and such. So I try to just face up to it. It's not happy. Just deal with it. And so I designed a chair that puts water out on the seat, through the seat and through the back. So when you're sitting in your bathtub, you're sitting on a chair, and you have warm, soothing water around your whole body.
I love that
So even if you
idea.
haven't soiled yourself, it's terrible. I'd like one. I mean, it's terribly comfortable. You have warm water around your body.
Well, how nice. So many people have to sit down in a shower now. Why not make it an
Absolutely.
ability so that you don't have to keep getting up to clean yourself or to take care of yourself when you've got the water doing that for you? That's
Well,
a
the other
brilliant
problem
idea.
is that people can't get up and down.
Yeah, right.
They can't sit and then get up.
Right.
And then you have falls and slips, and people split their
I
heads
love
open.
your ideas. I want all of
And
these in my
plates, and
home.
let's talk about plates. Simple things like knives,
Dinnerware.
forks, dinnerware.
Yeah. Well, I discovered by watching, and I watch a lot of aging people purposely, their portions are different because they eat less as you get older.
Yeah.
Medications are a real primary part of dinner now, 3 times sometimes for lots of people. And nutrition, the nutritional needs of older people is very, very different than for those of us who are younger. So when you take all those factors in, to make another long story short, I designed modular dinnerware that you can, first of all, the plates are smaller, the dishes are smaller, so a smaller portion doesn't look like it's lost, which is dumb. I mean, when you give a 10-inch, 12-inch plate to a person with a 2-inch diameter hamburger on it, I mean, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
And people, if you watch them, they know something's wrong, and they're stigmatized.
Not only that, but in my family, I tend to pile on the food for
Well,
family members.
sure.
And the ones that don't eat as much as they used to because they've aged or they
Yeah.
have infirmities,
Right.
they get mad because you've piled food on again.
And now there's an obligation to eat
That's
it.
right.
and they
I
don't-
feel like I have to fill up the whole plate, so I have a smaller plate.
Oh, I mean, it's beautiful. It's the simplicity of scale.
Well, it is.
You know,
It
it's
just says that there's nothing wrong with you, that this portion is appropriate and healthy and nutritionally is right. And not only is it nutritionally right in size, but it's in combination with other foods. And so that therefore the plates and dishes deliver the combinations that are healthier for people in an order that they can eat literally around from left to right, right to left. So
You mean there's a scoop out and
well, the modular dishes coming together kind of suggest non-verbally in visual ways. This is what designers do. In visual ways, what you should be eating in what order. Now, you don't have to eat in that order, but if you do, things go together nutritionally better,
right.
and you digest more easily.
But you can also serve in a modular fashion.
Absolutely.
So you can tailor the serving of the meal
Nice.
to the people.
To the meal of the day
to the
and
meal of
the
day
person and their
the
disease
person.
combinations.
Exactly.
What about pills?
That's what I was about to say next. The medications are not in addition to, they're part of the meal, because often you're supposed to take pills not on an empty stomach. And so a lot of people wait till after dinner, or they take them before and they have problems. So this makes medications part of the meal. And so when you're eating this, that, and the other thing, your medications are taken with the food. It's just a little easier on the stomach. But the point is the dinnerware says all that non-verbally to the user.
See, and that is so important until you've gone through this with someone,
Exactly.
reminding someone that they need to take a pill before they eat,
Exactly.
or versus while they're eating
Yeah.
or after they're eating, can be
Right.
very hard for that person to understand or to
Right.
remember. And
Mhm.
And there's another side, there's on many other sides to this, but the other is from the nurses or a caregiver side. A lot of older people spit out their medications because they don't want them.
And they're
Well,
suspicious of them.
but
yeah.
when there's a place for it and it's still there, they're still there, the medication's still in place, the nurse can see this person hasn't taken them yet. Now, if they hide them, you've got another problem. But at least you can watch while they're eating, and the nurses do. They see what you're eating in what order,
You're-
if they're good nurses.
your mind is incredible.
It is,
Absolutely
isn't it?
incredible. We're talking with Professor Emeritus and Dean Emeritus Alan Samuels out of the University of Michigan. He is an industrial designer. He's talking about the projects he has been working on. Since you retired a few years ago from the U of M, you have 4 distinct areas that you have been working on solo. You have not married up with a corporation. You would like to see these things come to fruition. So you're designing what you would like, and then you hope that someone picks these up. Is that correct?
Yes, at this point in my life, I'm not about to die, but I am 71. I've never been 71 before.
You look younger than that.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
you look
No, I-
I think he
fantastic.
invented
Thank you, I
some sort of
appreciate
skin
that.
treatment that we don't know about.
No, it's having a good life. I've been lucky. But anyway, this is the time of my life where I'm going to do what I want to do. And so I find that with clients, even though I've loved them, I've designed for 30 corporations, and almost except for one, I had a good experience. But now I want to do things that I want to do, and most of them don't want to do these things. It's very difficult to get a company to deal with disease-related products because it stigmatizes their products. Even at, even at Owens, Illinois, we made those glasses. They refused, for their own reasons, to not put anything about dexterity problems or arthritis on the package. They just wouldn't say anything about it. So a lot of the people that would have benefited never knew that this was for them because as a company, they just felt it wasn't in their business or interest to speak about sad things like, illness and pain in your wrists, and that's why you can't.
But isn't that funny now with the baby boomer generation looking into these kinds of products? Huge. I
You
mean,
would
Yeah,
think.
you wonder if
It's
it's
still,
still around, yeah.
all I can say is that it's either me or things are still difficult. Companies are not welcoming. I've not found myself being welcomed. Oh boy, you've got something to help people.
To give people an idea, the 4 areas that Alan is interested in: aging, we talked a little bit about that,
Yeah.
disaster relief,
Yeah.
third world challenges,
Yeah.
and there's a 4th one in there?
Products that are beyond current technologies, things that I'd like to see done that I don't know how to do.
But you've got an idea for
I
it.
do, and so I model them and I make them look real, and I try to convince people or companies to kind of think about it because it sets up an opportunity to invent.
Like what?
One of them is a small keyboard-like device for children and a round dome associated with it. And what it does is it invites children to type stories. And so if a child can type, and I have 4-year-old grandchildren and some are older, they all type. I mean, these days they type. It's
They
not
all
a
know how to
problem.
keyboard.
Yeah, they do.
If they can spell, they can type. So the point is, if a child is encouraged to write a story, my proposal is that whatever they type, they'll see in the round, real time, in that dome. In other words, if I say Mary had a little lamb, you'll see Mary and her little lamb, literally in the dome.
Oh, I love that.
But the idea is...
Your story comes to life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the idea is, what I'm trying to do is merge literacy, verbal literacy, with visual literacy.
Holographically, couldn't you do that?
I don't want to do it holographic.
Oh.
I don't want, a hologram is fine, but I want this in the round. So if a kid's looking 360 degrees around the dome, you'll see as if you would in real life. Now, see, I don't know how to do that. It's not a hologram where you just have this image being projected. I want it to look as real as it can, except for the scale, of course.
Yeah.
But it's in this dome. And so the child, what's happening is the child's typing the story and seeing it. But then by virtue of seeing it, they're going to get inspired to retype or write more of the story. So verbal and literal literacy are being merged because I find that there's a separation.
Do you have any idea of how it could come to life like that?
Not a clue. and I really don't care. I mean, I'd love to see, I think my job, I've made it my job to say to people, this is what I'd like to do. Can you figure out how to do this?
It doesn't prevent you from imagining it.
Nothing's going to prevent me.
Yeah,
No.
therein lies the secret of design thinking. Right?
Well,
so
there's-
very quickly, the paint can, and then I want to talk about some of the
the paint
tornado-related issues.
Damian
So-
Farrell is local architect. It's Damian on Design each week on 1290 WLBY. This is one of the most fascinating guests
Isn't this cool?
you have brought into the studio for your segment here. He is Professor Alan Samuels, Professor Emeritus and Dean Emeritus out of the University of Michigan, and he is an industrial designer.
Paint can.
The paint can, he loves the paint can. I do
Love
too,
the paint
actually.
can.
The paint can, conceptually, is another concept that I don't know how to do. The university is doing research on nanopigments, or nanoparticles, which means these really, really small things. They're talking about being able to have them drive through your veins and deal with disease and such. They're very small little machines and mechanisms. So I was thinking, for whatever reason, if I had a can of paint and it was filled with nanopigments, and on the cover of the can was a little computer, I could take a color sample and scan it into my little computer in the top of the can. It would tell the nanopigments in the can to become that color, and they would. So you'd have a gallon of red or blue or green.
Oh.
And then if you had half a can left, once you did the painting, you could go back to the computer
Yeah,
and,
just switch
and
color
change
for the
the
next
color.
room.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
How cool. Isn't that
But
great?
I don't know how to do it, so I just
Figure it out. I love
yeah.
it.
Figure it out. I love it. Yeah. So you can see why when I call a paint company and say, "Guess what? I've got an idea," and if they ever say, "Please tell me," which they seldom do, I should say. If they do say, "Yeah, tell me," and we work out the legality so I can share my idea, they look at me like, "Are you crazy?" You know, first of all, we don't know how to do it, or we don't want to do it, or they kind of scratch their heads and they never email back. So that's how these things go these days for me. But I'm having a wonderful time thinking about these things and solving serious. The paint isn't as serious as other problems like with real people like
Right.
aging
Yeah,
and
let's
such.
talk about kids and tornadoes and school buildings. And
Boy,
yeah, this is a heavy topic, but
Yeah.
we lose hundreds of kids a year, right?
We do.
In the tornado belt.
Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and every once in a while in Michigan, we have a tornado that comes through and takes people out. It kills them. And if the whole building goes, you're done. And there's nothing we can do. But that seldom happens. It's usually a building is damaged. And by examining it the way I tend to do, I found that the majority of injuries and deaths come from shrapnel going through the building. Steel, glass, metal, all kinds of wood, whatever's in the building gets taken by the wind and thrown and kills people.
Mm-hmm.
So if an office or a school doesn't have a safe room, which many do not, even in places like Oklahoma, where you think they'd have to, but they don't, the kids are still dying. And every spring, I'm afraid it's going to happen again now, because it's tornado season, someone's going to die because they have no safe place to go. So to make a long story short, I designed what I thought was a very simple panel system. And I don't want to say too much about it because I haven't protected the idea yet. But the essence of it is panels would be used immediately to come down and protect kids from the shrapnel.
Wow.
That you can do
Yeah.
tomorrow. You could retrofit tomorrow. And it's just off-the-shelf technology. It's just really, really easy to do. The real punchline of the story for now is that I've called the governor's office of all those states, and not one of them will talk to me. And what I've said to them, I'm not selling anything, because I'm not. I'll give you this design, just prototype it. And if it works, terrific. And if it doesn't work, then I'll know, I'll learn something, and we won't worry about it. I won't call you again. But not one of them would even listen to the idea. And all I can say right now, again, because I would like to protect this idea for the moment, it's terribly, terribly simple. You can retrofit it. There's no changing architecture. There's no rebuilding buildings. It's minimal in terms of cost. It's just terribly simple. And you could retrofit it like tomorrow morning, and then the next day, if a tornado came through, you'd have protection from shrapnel. Now, if that doesn't work because the building is devastated, regrettably, I can't do much more about it. But I can keep you from getting chopped up by shrapnel. That's not hard to do.
Yeah.
And I can't get anyone to listen, including the companies who make the materials. I've called them and said, I've got a great idea for your materials. And not one of them will say...
Why do you think they're not paying attention?
some things I can't explain. I really can't. I don't know if they were frightened because I was selling and I said I wasn't, or because they're already working on something, which maybe they could be.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain it. But it upsets me because the kids are going to die again. Not to get melodramatic, but someone will die from shrapnel, which is dumb. I mean, it's just plain dumb.
And some of it is probably litigious, right? The society we develop, but it's also probably, I mean, some of these companies have their own development teams on board.
Yes.
And then there's always the issue of, well, if you take my idea, oh, you know, am I as a company going to get sued later because we've used your idea, and regardless of what kind of legal arrangement you've come to, but, you know, we've all just become, there's just this fear, right?
Well, the corporate, I mean, to be fair to the corporations, they have problems with liability. People do call them and say, I have an idea. They share the idea with them. The company probably has already thought about it 1,000 times and legitimately says, I'm sorry, Mrs. Jones, but we really did think about this. Mrs. Jones doesn't believe you, gets a lawyer. Now they have to spend a year defending themselves.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's why they don't want outside ideas.
Mhm.
And even if you sign disclosure forms or non-disclosure forms, they're still liable. And again, they have their own staffs doing this work. So I don't blame them. I understand.
But
It
they
just
don't have
frustrates me.
Alan Samuels on staff.
Well,
I have never met anyone like you. I want to go back to my first question before we close out here, and that was how you got into this. It's one thing to go to school, etc., but tell me about little Alan growing up. Your mom and dad, and where
my
you came
little
from.
little Alan, he's still little. The only thing I can think of to say that I remember was I had a grandfather who, in those days, we had families that lived in the same
Yeah.
buildings,
Right.
and so we had multiple generations.
And this
living
was
together.
where?
In Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, in a building, not a house.
Right.
And so we had multiple families, and so I spent a lot of time with a grandfather who would give me a screwdriver, a pliers, and old clocks. And he'd say, just give me the glass, but the rest is yours. And I would take these things apart, and I loved it. I was fascinated by the gears. I mean, it's kind of corny to say,
No.
but I was. I loved the mechanisms, and I just loved the fact that I could take them apart. I could never get them all together again, of course. But they were always old, wonderful clocks, which I wish I had now. And that's kind of how I just, tools for me were just...
I bet you couldn't get them together, but you made them into something different.
I did. I made them into all kinds of things that, yeah, I mean, all kids have imagination,
Yeah.
not just me. But it was great fun. That's how it started. I just played with things that I could make.
Thank you for sharing yours today. Your imagination is incredible. Alan Samuels, he is the former dean of the School of Art and Design. He was there in the 90s and actually started out at the University of Michigan in 1975 as a professor of art and design, and he continues to design and develop products that include these disaster shelters, mobile devices for aging individuals, and other concepts that challenge current technologies. We've got to have him back.
We will have him back.
Thank
There's
you
so
very
much more to
much. Thank you.
cover. Thanks, Ellen.
Great
Been a
fun.
pleasure. And Damian Farrell's Damian on Design each week on the Lucy Ann Land Show, Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY.
Should have
Wow.